Well, welcome to the City Administrator's Report and our Council Preview program for this week. And we have a lot on tap. It's already the beginning of June, and I have Steve Barg here with me. And again, I am doing double duty, doing both because our producer, David, is on vacation. So we're now doing the flipping of the cameras like I used to do before. But like I said, this is the City Administrator's Report on the first part, and then Council Preview on the second part. So thanks again for coming, Steve.
You're welcome. Good to be here with you, Tom. And as I drove down here to do the show today, I drove past Wednesday Family Plaza, and I saw the fountains gushing and the kids playing in the water. So we've hit the time of the year that's pretty exciting for young families.
Well, I haven't been out since I came in at around 7:30, so it's probably nice out by now.
It is. Not real warm, but warm enough for people who want to get out and use the fountain, and I can see that there's some young children having a ball out there.
All right, sounds good. All right, well, let's start with a few questions that I have that are ones that I want to know a little bit more, and I hope our viewers would as well. Currently, we have some vacancies in the department. Well, I shouldn't say department, in departments. Right. HR director, as well as our development services and our associate planner. Can you get us up to date on that, please?
I can, Tom. And before I start it, I'd like to just begin by saying we've come a long way to get down to the point where we only have like 3. Those who've been following us for a while, maybe over the last 6 months, know that we've had resignations or retirements of our finance director, our fire chief. We had to get a new police chief, wastewater superintendent. We've had a lot of openings, but we've narrowed it down really to a few, and I'll start out with the HR director, Human Resources. We have someone signed on now to begin hopefully late at the end of this month. I can't say the individual yet. They're still going through the process. I don't believe as I tape this, necessarily even gotten everything cleared with a background check and whatnot, but it all looks really good, and we hope to have her coming on board with us, like I said, around the end of the month. That'll be good. It's an important role for the city. Development Services Director, for those people who don't know that, is oversees planning and zoning along with economic development and building inspection. We've had a hard time finding candidates. We went through one round, ended up having a top candidate who declined, someone from out of state who ultimately decided maybe best for them to stay where they were. And now we're going through a second round and not getting a whole lot of new candidates. It's been a struggle. I'm told that and this applies to the associate planner too, I'm told that there just aren't as many applicants coming forward for jobs. So part of it is the unemployment rate is fairly low at 3.6%. And I'm not sure what else the rest of it is, but I've talked to people who are in HR, and they tell me, Tom, that candidates are hard to come by nowadays in all levels of organizations. So we're still looking for both a development services director and an associate planner who is in that department, does a lot of work with the Plan Commission, conditional use permits, rezoning requests, site plans, those type of important things. And we're still in the hunt for both of those positions, hoping to get them filled, hopefully, somewhere in the first half of the summer if we can.
Well, I bet you're excited to get those filled. You've been doing a lot of that work.
Yeah, I have. And we have good people at City Hall. You know that. My administrative assistant, HR Assistant Administrative Specialist, Amy, has been doing a lot of the HR stuff, and other people have been helping too from finance and elsewhere. And on the development services side, Pat Kilty, our building inspector, has stepped up and done a marvelous job. Stephen Wiley, our city planner as well. Natalie, who is the administrative associate in the department. So people pitch in, but I've certainly done a lot more work in both of those departments than I normally would, and looking forward to having people come on board. Even just filling the HR director's role in the coming weeks will be a positive in terms of my workload.
All right, let's go on to the next question. I wanted to ask you about upcoming projects. I know the city has to borrow money. Is there a dollar figure that you can share with us?
Yeah, we're looking at roughly $4 million, and that'll be largely for streets, but also for our buildings and facilities, parks, things like that. The real kicker right now, we're kind of holding off. There's been a project we've been talking about. I think I've alluded to it a little bit in our conversations, for a new housing development in the southeast side of town, around 21st and Washington, and still working through the process as to whether or not that will come to fruition. If it does, they're looking for some assistance from the city under TIF District 13. That would bump up that borrowing. But as it is right now, with the main types of things that we borrow for every year, streets, buildings, facilities, improving our parks, those types of things, it's going to probably be right around $4 million, give or take, one more time.
All right. Let's talk about fuel. We all know that we're paying a lot at the pump. What does that do for the city regarding to like police, fire, and even our streets department? Anything that we could do?
Well, let me start by saying that every day when I drive home for lunch, I live up in the area of Fleet Farm, and I see it looks like the sign changes every single day. I think it seems like gas goes up 10 cents or something every single day. I know that's not really true. If it did, it would be way higher than $4.89 right now, but we all see it and we all feel it. But when we do our annual budget, what we did for 2022, we always give a buffer with the expectation that we want to cover overages. No one could have planned for an overage of this much. I think when the year started, Tom, we were probably at 3 something, and now here we are at almost 5. So it is getting hard. You know, we try to trim the usage where we can, but police officers have to respond to calls, firefighters have to go to fires, building inspectors have to go out in the field to do inspections. So there are only so many places we can trim, and we'll probably have to deal with it as a contingency item for the most part. The trick now is looking ahead to the 2023 budget, which we're going to start here in the next 30 days or so in earnest. And how do we plan for that? I mean, is it going to keep going beyond 5? Is it going to fall back down? We're definitely going to allow enough, I would think, of a buffer or a fudge room, as they call it, for future increases. But it's hard, and we are going to struggle as a result. We try to cut other costs where we can to keep it within budget, but it's difficult.
We probably spend quite a bit on fuel. You probably don't have that number here in front of you at this point, but I would bet that tank over at the garage is filled quite often because PD uses that. Maybe even fire uses it. I'm not sure. I think a lot of them do.
Yeah, I think PD and streets are probably the biggest users. You know, fire's up there too, but in those departments, I mean, PD, think of what they do. They're constantly out on the road. They're constantly responding to calls, doing traffic enforcement, doing medical assist. So they're using a lot of fuel. That's why we go through squad cars as quickly as we do too. We rotate them generally every 3 years if we can, and that's because of the high level of use.
Yeah, most definitely. We actually run an old squad, and it's pretty well used up. It's one of those that, isn't probably going to fit the bill for what they're doing. It might do it for us driving around here, but otherwise,
No, but I do. That's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up, Tom, because we do try when we can. Think of when you have kids growing up, can you do hand-me-downs? Well, we kind of do that. When it can't be a squad anymore, it's lost a lot of its kick and it's worn out from the excessive idling. That doesn't mean it can't be used sometimes for a few more years for a department to drive to and from meetings and those kind of things. But even that wears out at a point because those vehicles have been through a lot of really tough usage.
Yes, definitely. Well, we've already had a couple years out of it, and it's been working out good. So 2 years already of savings, and I'll take it. All right. Well, I got 2 more questions for the city administrator report part. Inflation, we were talking about with gas. Is there any way a municipality can help the residents in inflation? Probably not, but I just thought I'd ask.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing we can do is keep it in mind as we head to 2023 budget. Which will be difficult because our costs are increasing, and yet we're going to be very cognizant of the fact that the people getting tax bills are already being hit with gas and grocery and all these increases. And to open up their tax bill and see a significant increase, is going to bite. It's going to really hurt. So I think that's the best thing we can do is try and trim where we can, try and carve out additional revenues where we can, and hold the line on taxes as best we can in 2023. We do get calls. I mentioned one of them to you before we started the program here, Tom. People asking about whether or not gas stations are taking advantage of us or these kind of things, by raising the prices so often. But that's not a city issue. We really don't control that. It's well beyond our level of government. But we do have concern for the residents, and so where we can, if we can, minimize the increases that we would impose on people, that's always a possibility.
All right, and let's talk about, we have a new mayor since April. It's about 2 months now already. Curious how things are going, and then kind of make sure that people understand the difference in your role and the mayor's role. You did a lot of those things as well as some other staff when the mayor we didn't have a mayor for 2 years,
right.
Or all year, a little over a year. How's it going?
Well, it's interesting. I've been here for almost 12 years now, Tom, 11 and a half, and I've served under 3 mayors, Chris Meyer, Bob McManus, and now Lois Teestrake, and they're all good people. They've all got different styles, and truthfully, I've been an administrator now for a quarter century in 3 cities, and I've probably had 7 or 8 mayors. Everyone has a different approach, a different way of doing things, so I think it's going really well. I have nothing but good things to say about Lois. I'm just getting used to a little bit the way she likes to do things and vice versa. As far as when to go to the mayor, when to go to the city administrator, I think the best way to reference it, there's no right or wrong. I mean, if a person calls me and they really need the mayor, I don't yell at them and say, why'd you call me? I'll give you Lois's number. And I know she doesn't do the same thing. But the mayor is the head of the legislative branch of government. So typically, if you feel like we need to have a new ordinance, you feel like we need to have something done at the policy level, you think we need to hold the line on taxes better this year or maybe fix up a park, you probably want to call the mayor. She's the one who is going to be able to work with the body best and look at some of those ideas for legislative or policy improvements. If you're really trying to find out, hey, look, how can we deal with this issue? I'm having a problem in my neighborhood with this, and we're not getting it resolved, and I think we need to get some help from the zoning administrator or whatever. You might call me, and I work with the staff and all the people we have on board to make sure that we deal with your problems and your concerns and get them resolved. I've had people call me in the last 2 or 3 months with everything from issues of neighborhood garbage that's not cleaned up and any number of things. I don't go out there myself, but I'm able to find the right person to help them get through it and get resolution. You can call the mayor for that, and she'll undoubtedly turn to me or to another staff person, but I think the mayor is best used for the higher level things that you want to see something done differently and how we operate in the community, what our policies and procedures are, and where we're headed as a city.
All righty. Thanks so much for all that information during our city administrator's report. We'll do that next time. I'll find 4 or 5 different questions, and that may be something that we've talked about that may be not resolved, might be resolved, that we weren't able to report on. It could be an ordinance that we changed, and that I think there's some coming up actually in the next council meeting. Maybe there's something we can talk about that if it does go through. So, all right, we're going to sign off on this part, and we'll be right back with our council preview for June 14th meeting. Well, welcome back to our council preview section. Tom Laux here, Communications Director, and alongside me that you don't see right now is Steve Barg, but you will soon, as I am switching the cameras, and it was hard for me to go back to his camera for a few seconds. All right, let's get into this about our council meeting that's going to happen on the 14th of June. We haven't had one for a while. We've had a little bit of a break because of that odd week in there in May and then our Memorial Day, but we're back at it, and let's talk about a public hearing. We have 2 of them. They're special assessments. I think you can tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, we're doing projects, and that's good. People want to see roads fixed, and the big one this year, as you know, is the reconstruction of East 17th Street. That's going from Maple to Peach Avenue, a pretty healthy distance. And it's really being upgraded with a sidewalk and everything else. It's going to be wonderful. As a result, there are many property owners along there who are picking up or have to pick up a little portion of the project. And I hope they realize that whatever they get as a bill, they look at it and they think, oh my gosh, I was hoping it wouldn't be that much, is a very small part of the overall cost of this project, which is well over $1 million. But as a result of that, they've probably gotten some indication of what it might be. They've had public information meetings about what the work is being done. Maybe it affects their driveway, maybe it affects other things that might end up being assessed. But they're going to have the assessment hearing on Tuesday the 14th, as you said, at the very beginning of the meeting. That's a time when anybody who is getting an assessment notice for that project, or also for any of the mill in place and overlay projects we're doing this summer, can come out and say, look, I just think I'm being overassessed. I don't think I'm getting the value for what you're saying I should pay for my part of it. And give the testimony, give the comments to the council. Later on in the agenda for both of those items, Tom, both the East 17th Street project and the general mill and overlay projects across the city. Usually there's about a dozen, I think, and I think that's true again this year. There'll be resolutions considered where the council will make those final, but they will take into account any information, any comments that they get from the public at the beginning of the meeting. So if you have concerns that you don't feel have been addressed by the engineering department or some of the meetings you've been at, this is your one last chance to stand up and say, I think it's a good project, but I think I'm being unfairly assessed the dollar amount that is on the notice.
Okay, so this is the first time they get to do this in front of the council. Good. Have they had the bill for a long time? Because the 17th Street project, has been going on for a couple months now. But is this the first chance?
We normally don't get a lot of people, Tom, who come to the public hearings before the council. And here's why. We start out with a public information meeting. Everybody gets to come, they get to see what's going on, they get to talk to Tom Turchi and members of his staff about what's being done to affect it. Is there going to be sidewalk? What's my share of that? Does my driveway have to be redone right in the right of way, and what will that cost? What part do I pay? So they get a sense, and then they also get a preliminary assessment. And what we say is normally we set it so the preliminary assessment, when we get to the final, it ought to be the same or lower. We don't want surprises. Very rarely do you see that the preliminary assessment is $2,000 and then we turn around and send you a letter for a final assessment of $3,000. It's typically something that we know we can meet, and if anything, it stays the same or goes down. But still, sometimes you get people who want to voice their concern. They like I said, like the project, like the way it's turning out or the way it's going, but they just don't feel it's fair that they have to pay a certain share that they have gotten an invoice for or a bill, and that's their opportunity.
Okay, here, Steve, there, I hit the button right. We talked about 17th Street. We kind of lumped in, I think, both of these, but let's talk about mill in place, because I don't think everyone knows what you mean by mill in place. There's more than one mill in place. There's plenty of them around the community. They could talk then, too, right?
Yeah, that's true. By the way, you're doing a good job of multitasking. and I don't think people at home necessarily know what Tom is going through at this moment doing this today. He's done that in the past, but does a good job of that. Yeah, a mill in place, we use that phrase a lot. Overlay, too, we use it. These are projects where you see work being done across the city, but they're not digging up the street and rebuilding it entirely. What mill in place is we take the existing surface, we peel it off, we grind it up, lay it back down, and then we add another couple inches of asphalt over that. So it's usually called mill in place and overlay. And these projects, you don't pay as much for your share as you would for a totally rebuilt street, because you're not getting all the subgrade. We're not replacing the utilities, these kind of things. We're just giving you another surface that hopefully will last another 15 years or more, if we're lucky. So there's probably, every year we do about 10 to 12 stretches of street with an overlay mill in place type of approach, and oftentimes it's just a couple blocks. But if you're on one of those streets, if you're getting a bill, you need to know that we're only charging you for a small part of that cost. The city is absorbing most of it, but property owners on either side pick up a small piece of the puzzle.
Okay, so it's not a piece on their right-of-way, it's the actual part of the road and divvied up among the residents and the city, and a small part to the residents.
That is correct. And people sometimes wonder, like if you're being charged for an upgrade of a driveway, well, why is that? Well, if your driveway is in good shape to where they don't have to do anything with it, that's one thing. But oftentimes there's driveways that need to be redone, the entrance, the part out in the right of way, and so those costs have to be borne by you as part of the process. But my wife and I live on North Hills Avenue. We had ours done 2 or 3 years ago, and we had to pay some money. Had to pay, I think it was a couple $1,000s, but it was a really good value, we believe, for what we got. And again, you can pay it all in one lump sum, or as a resident, you can have 10 years to pay. There's an interest cost for it. You have to pay interest if you pay over the 10-year installment, but you can break it up. Like I said, with $2,000, you can break it up to $200 a year plus interest if you prefer to look at your assessment in that way.
All right. So, not to keep talking about it, but that piece, the driveway piece, like an apron, I believe that's changed usually. Where if you're ditch street.
Yeah, right. It does matter whether you have curb and gutter or whether you have a street that has ditches, and this all plays into what work is done. Do they have to put in new culverts? Did they have to do more grading? That does end up in the final bill. But again, I think in most cases, Tom, the final bill is a small part, maybe, I don't know, I shouldn't guess a percentage, but a very small piece of the overall cost of what the city bears to do the work that they do.
All righty, sounds good. Let's move on down here. This has always been a big thing talking about, and things are moving forward slowly on the 2nd Street corridor plan. That's over by the old Baltus, is that right, building?
Yeah.
And post office.
Yeah, and a lot of people may not remember this, but hopefully some of you will, that the 2nd Street Corridor Plan, if you're thinking, didn't I hear about this a long time ago? Yeah, it goes back 5 or 6 years ago when this was first brought forward. But the idea was to go farther than we did. Initially, we just went from Maple to Chestnut, a 2-block area, 1 block on either side of Central. And then as time passed, we wanted to get to the other sides, east of Maple if we can, and certainly west of Chestnut. In fact, Tom, from the beginning, the plan was to get out to Stephen J. Miller Park. We want people to go to the ball fields. We want them to enjoy the baseball tournaments or whatever. We want them to see that it's very easy for them to come downtown, eat, shop, and enjoy our downtown district. So what we're looking at right now is, if you look at from the post office to the west, what could that area be? What could that area to the west and a little bit to the north of that be? Retail, commercial, multifamily housing? Is there a possibility of single-family housing? What would there be? Public improvements or some green space? So that's what Van de Waal, our consultant from the Madison area, has been looking at, working with a committee. We have an ad hoc committee, for lack of a better term, that's been helping them along the way. But now it's getting to the exciting part. In late April, the plan was presented to the Economic Development Board and the Plan Commission. They liked it a lot. Last month, it was presented to the Community Development Authority. They had some questions, but they seemed generally favorable. Well, now it's going to go to the council. And the council is going to hear the presentation by Van de Waal on Tuesday, June 14th. They're not going to be asked to do anything at that point. Just soak it in, learn about it, do a lot of Q&A, ask all their questions, and then 2 weeks later, on the 28th of June, we'll be looking for them to consider approving that plan, adopting it. Now you say, well, if they adopt the plan, what does that mean? We're going to spend $10 million? What are we doing? Well, there's a lot of work from there. Got to dig into what the different pieces of the plan are. What would require public involvement from a financing standpoint? What would be private improvements? We've got Weinbrenner, the shoe factory, great place, but they're looking to relocate out of downtown. We got the Public Works Garage, it's been there seemingly forever. They're looking at the opportunity of moving to the southeast part of town. So there are really some real possibilities out in that northwest part of downtown for some redevelopment, and we're excited to see what they might be.
All right, yeah, that is pretty exciting area to have that almost right next to, well, it is next to the plaza.
Yep.
So, the plaza, sync to the ball fields, and then get up and over the bike path. It all makes a lot of sense, but it's not probably a cheap endeavor here for the city to do.
No, when we're looking at creating another TIF district, we're talking right now with our consultant, Ehlers, our financial advisor, about how that would work. And, again, people sometimes hear TIF district and they get concerned what that means. And 3 years ago, we had some issues come up with our TIF district financial management, which we've cleared up. But basically, it's a funding mechanism that if you have to spend money to do some public improvements, you can recapture that money as the tax increases come from the new businesses or homes or whatever it is out there. So it is an exciting prospect. There's a long way to go. But for those of you who might be thinking, oh, I'm a little nervous about this, don't forget how nervous people were about the first part. People were concerned about one-way traffic downtown, that would be bad. People have gotten used to it. People were wondering whether Wenzel Family Plaza would be worth it, $2 million. Look at that place on a Friday night with concerts and activities. I just drove here today and saw a lot, families having picnics and kids playing in the water. It's a good amenity for our downtown. So we want to keep it going. We want to keep improving downtown Marshfield.
Yeah, definitely, most definitely. All right. I thought CIP was over, but it is not. We still, or not we, you and I, but the council has to approve this CIP. That's on the agenda.
Yeah, CIP is a gift that keeps on giving. And truthfully, when I came here, people talked about, well, you have the CIP, that's the Capital Improvement Program, the 5-year blueprint of major expenditures, and then you have the budget. Oh, great. Those time in between the two, I'll get all sorts of things done. I'll be at my desk and it'll be wonderful. Well, the budget process really starts about now, as the department heads start working on their budgets. It gets done in late November. And the capital improvement plan starts in January. So when we talk about downtime away from our two big financial plans, we're talking about December. That's about it. But the council's made a couple changes along the way, the biggest of which is, and I think we might have talked about this before, Tom, that they wanted to move the bathrooms up at Wenzel Family Plaza. And, just to say it again, when we built the plaza back in, 4 years ago, whenever it was, we wanted to put bathrooms in, permanent bathrooms initially, but we just couldn't fit the cost into the amount of money that we pulled together. So we kind of made a placeholder or a marker in our minds that we wanted to come back someday and do it. Well, staff put it in the plan for 2025, and a couple of our council members looked at that and said, we appreciate that, but we want that done sooner. So they moved it up in the CIP to 2023. So you can look forward, if this gets passed on Tuesday, Tom, to seeing planning start very soon for placement, location, and the whole look and feel of permanent restroom facilities at Wenzel Family Plaza.
Well, maybe you guys have plans from previous that actually had the bathrooms in there. I don't know. I wasn't here.
Yeah, there was a potential location for them. I have to go back and see if that was the final placement that came up. I will say this. I mean, I think the fact that we are talking about permanent bathrooms is a good thing, because if the plaza had been a flop, if we were having no concerts or activities or gatherings and people weren't coming out to have picnics, we wouldn't be talking about permanent bathrooms. We'd be talking about why in the world did we spend money to do this. This is a natural outflow of having a success. That people are saying, it's great, but now what about changing areas for our kids? What about places to go during a 3-hour concert, to be able to use facilities? So the fact that we're even talking about it tells you that this has been a real positive for our downtown.
All right. Well, most of those plazas are really popular, not just here. Wausau's 400 block, as they call it. I remember it back in 99, 98. How many times I had to go over there and photograph that. It was man. East Bay over there. That's where it was. And they knocked that whole block down. And that was pretty neat back then. But now, look at that plaza and what they have in there. I call it a plaza, but now, and look at ours. So it's pretty much a win-win to get people back downtown. So it's been a good thing. So.
Yeah, there were people at the time, and I don't criticize them, who were really not happy with that. They didn't know why we were raising private money. They didn't know why we were spending public money to do that. Just do other things, fix our streets, fix our parks. And I'm not taking shots at those people at all. Sometimes I feel like one of those people that we ought to tend to what we already have. But the people who had this, and that includes Jason Angel, our former Development Services Director, and many other community leaders. Aaron Howard's been part of that. I think Bill Sentholz from the EDB, who really wanted to see that happen, had a vision. And they thought, if we can have a gathering place downtown, we can draw more attention to the downtown district of this community. And that's good for community, it's good for shopping and restaurants, it's good for everybody. And we didn't have as much space as they have at the 400 block in Wausau. So what we created is a lot smaller scale, but it's been very popular and it's growing. Nikki Anderson does a great job of the programming out there, and she says the last meeting I was at that there's another great season of use coming up here this summer, so we're very excited about it.
All righty, Steve, that sounds good here. All right, what else did I have on here? A few things, a couple more things here. Pay compression team report. That you have a team that you formulated, and this has to do with how management and staff pay comes together. Is that right?
Yeah, particularly in the police and fire. This started because the police and fire departments were reporting, especially the fire department, Tom, that the pay for firefighters and on the other side, police officers, is getting so close to the pay of the management, the chiefs, the deputy chiefs, those kind of folks, that they're having a hard time incentivizing people to try for those management positions. The theory being, hey, if I'm only making a little bit less than you, do I really want to aspire to the job you have and take on the headaches just to make a little bit more? So they try to look at how we can make sure there's enough space. Well, we've had meetings now, I think maybe a half a dozen of them, Tom, over the past year on this with the team. And the team includes me, the finance director, a couple of council members, police chief, fire chief, folks like that. And the problem is equity across the board. So in other words, we see the problem, what do you do about it? And if you change it just for police and fire, well, what about the other departments that have some pay equity concerns? So what we've come out of it is I'm going to give a report on what the ideas are. There's some good ideas out there to try and provide more separation that they need to incentivize people to try for those higher positions. But we're going to start out with recommending a comprehensive market study update, a compensation study update. So back in 2017 and 2018, we did a study of compensation and set up new pay ranges for every job. And so now, I've been talking to Milena at McGrath, and she says, Steve, we always thought that 5 years later you'd probably want to do a market update. There's been inflation. There's been changes in the way jobs are being valued. What if an accountant and a building inspector and a police officer a police officer, that's a union position, but let's say a police lieutenant or whatever, if the market for those has gone up differently, there's more demand for this position, a little bit less demand for that position, we need to take a look at rebalancing the scales. So I'm going to be presenting, first of all, the overall report on how we could help to get this compression thing dealt with in the fire and police. But then the back end of that presentation is going to be that for all the employees, including police and fire, we really ought to look at doing an updated compensation market study to find out, are we still in the right ballpark, or have we fallen behind in certain areas?
All right, so I'm hitting the buttons here. You said that your compensation plan took place in around 2018.
Yep.
I wasn't here yet. You didn't have one in place before, as I'm understanding. Did you have these issues before the plan, or has part of it just the difference in the times and how people's jobs are different? I don't know if you can answer that or not.
Yeah, we did have a plan in place back in 2013. So we went 5 years with a plan called the Carlson-Dettman Plan. Yeah. That's another consulting firm that does compensation plans. And nothing at all against Carlson-Dettman, but there were some concerns raised about whether or not that plan was effectively moving people to where they really deserve to be in terms of market pay. So that's when we got connected with McGrath out of Northern Illinois, and in late 17 and early 18, they did a plan with us that's, I think, really done some good things for us. There's always concerns about how it's implemented, internal concerns about how it's implemented, but I think the plan itself has been a good one. Now we have to look at, have we fallen behind in the last 5 years in terms of what the market is saying these positions are worth?
Well, Steve, you have the hardest job. You got to keep us all happy.
Well, it's hard, and there's a lot of communities, or at least some communities, I shouldn't say a lot, Tom, where the compensation plans are really done by the administrator and the HR director. Yeah. But I cannot imagine sitting in my office, or it used to be Jen's office, now whoever, this person who joins us, and talking about this, because, boy, that's really, there's a lot to that. You get comparables from other cities and private employers, but you have to look at a whole lot of things to balance the scales to determine what is the true value of a job. Do you exercise independent judgment? What level of technical skills does it require? What level of education does it require? All these kind of things go into. It's not just, well, Steve Barg works really hard. No, it's what are the duties and what levels of skill and responsibility are involved. And I'd prefer not to be involved in that. I have been at a previous employer where I actually did the pay plan, but I'd prefer to leave it to the experts who have a lot more skill in putting those together.
Sure. All right, I think we got one last thing in here. It has to do a little bit, well, it definitely has to do with my department. Yeah. Which committees our meetings should be filmed? That was brought up by a council member, Adam Fisher?
Yeah, I think it was. And then at the end of the last meeting, Mike O'Reilly, a new council member, brought up a twist to that as well. But at the main meeting last time, Tom, they talked about adding 2 committees to what we film. And right now, just to chronicle it, we film not just the council, but we film I shouldn't say we, like I'm behind a camera or I'm in the studio, but Board of Public Works and Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee, those are the 2 council subcommittees, for lack of a better term. We also cover the Plan Commission, Fire and Police Commission, and more recently, Economic Development Board and Utilities. But the 2 that came up at the meeting were Judiciary and Licensing. They're the ones who deal with operators' licenses, or bartenders' licenses, as they're sometimes called. Licenses for business, not just for alcohol service, but also for other types of operations. So that was mentioned. And also the Parks, Recreation, and Forestry Committee was mentioned as one that they'd like to see. And that's a fairly high-profile one because of, people have families, they have kids. They want to see their parks improve. They want to see the trails and the zoo get better as well. So those 2 came up, and I'm going to come back to them with the idea that maybe they want to go ahead and move those forward. You and David are at the heart of this. Some of these committees and boards are easier to cover than others. Some are at City Hall, which makes them a little bit easier. Some are at remote locations. And there's only 2 people when you look at David and Tom. They can't be everywhere. So we're going to see if they want to go ahead and do this, and are they workable. The one thing about Judiciary and Licensing is it's right before the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee, so that's helpful. And I understand that the Parks and Recreation Committee is willing to come to City Hall, which would be helpful too for the filming. The other one that was mentioned by Mike O'Reilly, our newer council member, is the school board. And just to note, the city does not, we don't control the school, certainly, and the school can decide what they want to cover and what they don't want to cover. But I did talk to the superintendent recently, and And if the city wants to do it, the school district is not looking to pay for it, or they're not looking to do it themselves, with their own cameraman or whatever. But so I think you'll see the interest in possibly having the city find a way to do that, probably with people outside of you and David, but somebody else willing to be paid to cover. But we'll see. Ultimately, the council will have to vote on all three of these, Tom. And when it comes down to a vote, who knows? There might be some members who say, look, I just don't think this is worth the time and money of our staff and our resources. But I think others will feel that it's a good step toward informing our public.
All right. Well, that comes to our end of our list. We've been talking quite a bit. Is there other pieces that you wanted to bring up that you wanted to? Otherwise, we're pretty much done on this one already.
Yeah, I would just encourage our viewers to look at the agenda. You'll see a lot of things on here that we didn't talk about. A number of them are on what's called the consent agenda, meaning they came from one of our committees, but that doesn't make them any less important. They involve the things that we do, who does them, what the cost is, and those types of things. So take a look at our full agendas anytime. They're on www.ci.marshfield.wi.us, our website, and you do a good job with that, Tom, and we try to keep people informed about what's being discussed at the council and committee level.
All righty, Steve, there. Thanks for sharing that information. That helps a lot. Again, the agendas are always there on a Friday. We're taping this a bit earlier. I don't know why. Maybe you're gone, Steve. I don't remember.
Yeah, I'll be gone. And that's part of the reason we're not talking more about consent agenda, because those items may or may not be recommended for approval by those bodies.
Thanks again so much for watching our council preview and earlier our city administrator's report. We'll be back in a couple weeks and do this all over again. Thanks for watching.